If you haven't done so yet, retape the areas around the sunroof opening on the car so that you don't accidentally scratch the paint. And then we're going to reinsert the sunroof panel back in with the little clips facing forward and up. And here's another reason why you're not supposed to grease the channels. You can see that there's contamination here on both sides. It looks like it's some of that same gray type of anti-seize that was present on the felt pads and on the cables when we first disassembled it. May give this a quick cleanup. But yeah, just another warning. Then go ahead and put this back in the car the same way that you, in the same orientation it was when you removed it from the car. So to position this panel correctly, after all the hardware is in place, slide it into this cavity in here with the clips facing forward and up this way, the exact same way that it was when we removed the roof panel. And then something a little bit tricky is that then you're supposed to engage the sides of the sunroof headliner panel into the these channels on either side of the rails. You can see it goes all the way to the end. And on the other side, it does the same thing too. The easiest way to do that, with all the hardware in place, is take this panel, sort of slide it in as best you can, then see how it flexes. Flex it enough to introduce this side of the panel into the channel in there. As you can see, you sort of just slide it in there. You should be able to get the whole side engaged. But now this side over here is going to be above. It's going to be kind of around here. So what you do is you slide this back to about there. Unfortunately, you're limited by these cable brackets and these little rods here. So what you do is you make sure this end is engaged in the channel, and you flex this while keeping that end engaged. Flex the center in order to get this edge of the headliner panel to slip past the rail and drop in. You may only get in like the first few inches. Then as you slide it forward, push in, get the next few inches, keep sliding in, and then eventually this entire side will pop into place. And now it's fully engaged. You can see here, or hopefully you can see, that both sides of the sunroof headliner panel are sitting in the channels. To install the sunroof panel into the car, you want to take the rear edge of the sunroof panel and introduce it as close to the rear of the opening as possible, because the seal on the car side gets in the way, so you can't just drop the whole thing in starting from the front, for example. So what you have to do is, and I apologize for demonstrating this on a black car, it's very difficult to see in this view. So what you have to do is push down on the deflector like I'm doing while you're supporting the back end here. And ideally, if I wasn't holding the camera with my other hand, I would have introduced or controlled the back end of the sunroof panel into that small space between the end of the seal on the car side and the end of the opening. Then what you do is because this is really the only space you have to work with without screwing up any of the seals. You sort of push up on the panel and keep it as close to the roof of the car as possible, and then you can slide it in up until at some point it'll clear the seal, and then it drops in. It starts to get a little hairy around here. What happens is that the width of the sunroof panel is greater than the inside width from here, where my finger is pointing, to the opposite side where the seal is. So if you try to just push the sunroof panel in, you risk rolling this seal down and peeling it off of the car. So you literally only have the only space you have is where the seal begins to transition underneath. There's a little bit of, it gets wider here, so you have a little more space between here and here. So imagine a very thin rectangle or slot that you can slide the sunroof panel into. Then once you get it in far enough, it'll drop in the way it's dropped in now. And now we can slide it forward, and then we can start to bolt things up. So once you get the sunroof to about this position here, you want to go ahead and slide your cables forward or backward as much as needed so that you can line up the holes in the cable brackets with the holes in the sunroof. Right there. So you slide this as needed to get them to match up. And then what you're going to do is install these little sliders in there, and then put the tiny bolts and washers that you removed with, I believe it was a 7mm socket. Do that on both sides. When you position this thin bracket over the, or rather underneath the sunroof cable bracket, notice how the two ears slide into a pair of corresponding ears on the sunroof panel itself. So that locks the cable bracket in position, and then you secure them both together to the sunroof panel with the bolts. Do not strip these. They're extremely tiny. Just snug them down by hand, and then when you're done, put this clip over this wire here, like that. I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of it is, but that's the way it goes. And repeat the same process on the other side. Next, you will take a pair of these guys with the stepped side facing down, and engage it into the edge, bottom edge of this, or top edge rather, of this track, of the cable track. Then you will line up the slot with the threaded holes. Let's make sure I'm referring to that correctly. Yep, that's the top edge track. Okay. Then you will take one of these little guys slip it over, line up the holes, and bolt it into place. Same thing on both sides. As you tighten these bolts down, it's going to start to cinch down the sunroof because this is locked into the track, which is bolted into the roof. So if it makes it any easier, because these bolts are so tiny and you don't want them to strip, the front edge of the sunroof is going to be fighting the deflector if it's sitting directly on top of it. So you may want to slide the sunroof manually back just a tiny bit, just to clear the deflector, and let this front edge of the sunroof drop down. And now you can snug these bolts down carefully with less risk of stripping them. Now you can come back to the rear of the sunroof and re-engage the drive gear onto the cables. You can barely see that the cables are in the tubes, and they have a portion of the spiral wound wire making threads. So when this flips back over, as I explained earlier in the video, the teeth will engage on there, and then when you reconnect everything, as the motor spins, it will push on the cables and drive the assembly, the sunroof assembly, forward and backward. So bolt this back up and reconnect your wires back the way they were before in the correct order. Got this bolted up. Wires are reconnected back the way they were. One last note while we're in here. This flexible, this is a little drive shaft that connects the motor to the gear case, and it's made out of kind of a rubber material. This one, when I disengage the gear case and let it hang, this thing's all full of cracks. So it might fail in the near future. But if you ever have a sunroof motor that just spins and is not moving forward or backward, this shaft may have failed. So you can come back here, undo the zipper and the headliner, and inspect it. At this precise moment, I don't know if there are replacement parts, but if there are, then you should be able to drop the motor and gear case assembly and replace this little rubber shaft. Last thing you want to do before you test drive this thing, go ahead and pull the sunroof headliner panel forward and engage the little clips into these square holes in the front edge of the panel. Pop those back in place and get ready to test it out. Alright, all the snaps are back in place. Now we can open the key, find the sunroof button, deep breath, I think this is a win. Time to take the tape off and go drive and see how it feels. So I just test drove the car and the sunroof works fantastic. A lot less rattles too, so I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Now the last step before you can call this a finished project is you want to reinstall the motor covers back in, because while the sunroof worked a lot better, the motor was very loud because it's open, and you know, there's only the thin headliner cover fabric, or the headliner fabric rather, between you and the motor, so all the sound goes all the way through. So I'm guessing that's what these guys are for. They're just simply kind of sound insulation pads to dampen or quiet down the motor noise. These are pretty beat up because, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, my sunroof had been leaking for a long time. You can see a lot of water stains on here. However, they're fairly straight and complete, so I think I'm gonna put them back in for now, and then at some point down the line, if I can find new replacements, I'll go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I'll have to figure out a way to fabricate new ones. You could probably make new ones with very thin wood of some kind, or thin plastic with foam on them, and maybe move these clips over and rivet them on the new material. But yeah, put these guys back in, and then you can call it. Then you can zip up the headliner and call it good. Some tips on how to install the motor covers. You want to go ahead and compare everywhere you see a clip like this on the cover. It will engage on a tab like this rectangular one here. So the cover will sit on the underneath and the clip will engage above it. And on the front side, there will be a screw hole. There are clip nuts here where you can align and screw them in place. This goes for both the passenger side and driver side one. You want to do the passenger side one first because it only has one screw and one tab. So engage that one, screw it down, and then the passenger side one, the right edge of the passenger side one will overlap on this bare edge here and will help hold the passenger side one in place. Then there are 3 screws that hold the passenger side one down. Once you get both pieces in, then you can zip up the headliner and you are done. Here's the installed sunroof motor covers. Here's the passenger side one, up to about there. And then the driver side one, or left side one, has 3 screws. I had to lay under here, lay on the back seat facing the ceiling in order to engage the 3 clips on this side, and then sort of slide this piece around until the 3 threaded holes lined up with the holes on the cover, and then I was able to drive the screws in. Not too tricky, just you know, a little tough to lay on the back seat here, but yeah, this is a done deal now. Now we're gonna zip up the headliner and call it good. So that's it, everyone. As you have all just seen, this is a fairly involved but not very complicated procedure. So I hope that this gives you the confidence to go ahead and fix your non-functioning sunroof on your Porsche 911. Please leave me a comment if this helps you out in any way. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out some of my other videos on this channel on Porsche 911 repair. Thanks a lot, and talk to you soon. Bye.